Hey guys, and welcome to another episode of Ratings Wars. And I gotta say, I think TV had a much stronger holdover last week than it did the week before. So let's dive right into the ratings. And also, happy Halloween. I am wearing my Prince Eric getup. I hope you guys like it. So, Once Upon a Time Season 7, Episode 4 got 2.47 million people to watch it, and Episode 3 had 2.49 million people watch it. That's essentially not a dip at all. Obviously, Episode 4 is a little lower, but it's really just a fraction lower. So this is where I think the numbers for Season 7 Part A are really going to be for the rest of the season. I don't see it going any lower than 2.40. If it goes to 2.3 or 2.2, that might be a cause for concern. But as of now, just given all of the negativity, quote unquote, behind it, I really think that this number is truly fine. The premiere always does better. Episode 2 for Once Upon a Time, for this season particularly, did better and is much higher than Episode 3 and Episode 4 because it was Jennifer Morrison's last episode and they actually marketed it. Episode 4, it was a great episode and my favorite so far of the season, but they didn't market it properly, and we've talked about how Once Upon a Time doesn't market its properties at all. It's crazy. Or how ABC doesn't market its properties at all. But I really would say the drop is not bad, and I really think all these episodes are going to be in the 2.4s or 2.5s. I don't see it going any lower as of now, unless the show does a complete dive bomb, going forward. But I don't see it happening. They've never really done too much of a dive bomb with their writing, and I actually have a couple comments about that in the viewer question segment. But overall, I would say Once Upon a Time fans do not have to worry at all about the show's ratings, at least for this week. And Episode 5 looks really, really good, so I do hope its ratings will essentially be, if not, around the same, if not a little higher. So I think Episode 4 and Episode 3, totally fine. It's good. I really would say Once fans should be quite happy with this because, again, the show had a lot going against it with Season 7. Now, Scandal Season 7 actually had an increase, which I didn't expect. I really expected to go lower and lower and lower because ABC doesn't market it. Kerry Washington kind of promotes it, but she really promotes herself because she has so many deals with different companies to be a sponsor. But Episode 4 had 4.88 million, and Episode 3 had only 40.70. So this is really what you want as well. You want your show to go up to the next number. So Episode 4 was pretty good, though I actually would say Episode 3 was better than Episode 4. I haven't really been too into all of Scandal Season 7 because I keep having mixed emotions over Olivia Pope. But overall, Episode 4 to Episode 7, 4 is better. And hey, ABC is so far doing really, really good. And speaking of doing good, How to Get Away with Murder Season 4 scored 3.56 million for its 5th episode, which is really good because Episode 4 of the same show scored 3.56, so it evened out. Now, the episode before Episode 4, which would be Episode 3, had 3.88 million, but it's not like a significant dip in the sense that it didn't go below the 5s. Now, obviously, you don't want your numbers to dip at all, but because because you can quote unquote round it, I think it's fine. So it stayed stagnant. Stagnant is good, and it's not as high as Episode 3 was, but I really would say because it's above 3.5, ABC should be really happy with everything that happened this week so far. How to Get Away with Murder Episode 5 was very good. I think How to Get Away with Murder is actually a better show right now than Scandal, though Once is my favorite of the 3. So ABC is doing great. I mean, Once had that very small dip, but that dip is, essentially what you expect. My guess, for Episode 5 will be 2.51. That's my best guess because it's a Princess and the Frog episode, and if they can hype it, they won't. But if Makia Cox can at least hype it, hopefully enough people will watch in to bump it up 0.04. Now, let's jump to the CW/Warner Brothers. Supergirl Episode 3 to Episode 2 was stagnant, just like How to Get Away with Murder. It's at 1.76, and Supergirl isn't getting canceled anytime soon. Melissa Benoist is super active on her Instagram. The CW loves the superhero shows because they don't really have too much else going on. We'll talk about Supernatural in a minute. But overall, I would say Supergirl is totally fine. I mean, these numbers are normal for the CW. I see no issue with it at all. I mean, it's low, but it's not like horrible because, you've seen these numbers with superhero shows and CW shows. So the fact that it stayed stagnant and didn't go to 1.5 like Arrow it's truly fine. Also, Supergirl, I think, is just a more enjoyable show than Arrow, though Arrow actually has a much better plot. It's not an oxymoron because I like the plot of Supergirl um, overall, but I think recently Arrow is just doing better, and I think Arrow needs to be better promoted. And one thing I've really noticed about the actors from the CW to actors from ABC is the CW actors really, really hype up their shows. It's really great. Though, some of the Once actors do this as well. But I really would say that in comparison, the CW actors are much better with hyping their shows up, which is why I think their shows also keep getting renewed, because their actors are super enthused. Though Rebecca Mader is probably the most enthusiastic actress I've ever seen. Now, for The Flash went up, which is awesome. It had 2.54 the week before, and this week it had 2.62, or last week I should say. So this is good. Flash is up. Flash is the best of all the CW superhero shows. In terms of its view count, it always has been since season 1 has aired, and it did the best. So that's good. I'm glad the Flash went up. Episode 3 was interesting because it was essentially just really jokey and kind of one-off-ish. Its overall plot wasn't super needed. The problem with the CW shows is they're so long. They would be truly fine with only 13 episodes because you kind of want to get to like the villains, but that's whatever. Then, just to briefly talk about the other shows, Arrow had a dip. It went from 151 to 134. Legends of Tomorrow went from 158 to 143. And then Supernatural went up to 193 from 190. So, the Arrow and Legends, Legends you kind of expect to be low, though you don't want it to be below the 1.5s. No show you really want to be below a 1. But if you're at least in the 1s, you want it above 1.5. So, this is a low episode for Arrow and a low episode for Legends. I don't think they have to worry at all, in all honesty, about their these shows because the superhero shows keep getting renewed, and I've talked about this at length. Supernatural is probably one of the most interesting shows on the CW in terms of just of the fact that it keeps getting renewed, and it kind of is reminding me of Once Upon a Time, and I have a comment about that in the viewer question segment. So, the CW, 2 of its shows dropped, 1 of its shows plateaued, 2 of its shows went up. So it has kind of an all-encompassing bag. So I would say Warner Brothers should be relatively happy with it, though maybe hope that Arrow and Legends get a little higher. Though Legends has never been super high in general. And Supernatural, you expect it to be 1.90 or 1.70. It's just kind of where it goes. Over at Fox, they had increases as well, which I think is also awesome. Lucifer Season 3, Episode 4 had 3.26 to 3.19 from the week before. That's great. And Gotham went up from 2.87 from 2.75. Or excuse me, Gotham went up from 2.87 from 2.75. And Episode 4 and Episode 5 of Gotham were 2.75, and then it went up. So it broke its stagnantness, which I think is fantastic that, instead of breaking in and going lower, it broke it in, went up. No episode of Gotham Season 4 has broken the 3 million mark, but this episode is relatively close to that number, so hopefully Gotham can get up to the 3s. Gotham is a DC show, and so is technically Lucifer, but they're on Fox, so that's why I'm including them as like the Fox properties, because they're on Fox. So I would say, Fox had a really strong week as well. I don't look at really at the other shows. I know The Gifted is a relatively popular show, but it just looks really awful. In my opinion, and I didn't like the trailer. But I would say Fox has a really strong week because both of their shows went up, a good chunk, which is good. Then, this is interesting. We've discussed how NBC Universal always has really intensive numbers because they're always so much higher than the other companies. It just makes sense. It's just as a huge draw for some reason to Universal. Even Grimm, when it was on Fridays, did much better than Once Upon a Time. But This Is Us went down, which I think is so crazy. So This Is Us had 10.65 last week, or 2 weeks ago, and then it had 10.60 last week. So it dropped again by 0.05, which I find hilarious because every episode of This Is Us keeps dropping. And I do wonder if it might drop all the way to the 9s. But This Is Us is such a great family show. I watch it with my mom, and I love This Is Us. So I do, wonder, why is it dropping? Like, why are the views, quote unquote, waning? Because it's not like super bad because it's still in the 10s, and the 10s are great. Everyone wants a show to be in the 10s. But I just find it interesting that in the long run, for the company that has the highest, it essentially dropped the most. So I think that's really interesting. So overall, I would say that Fox won the day here because both of their shows went up, nothing went down. ABC and the CW are looking good. Their shows going forward just need a little bit of improvement in their marketing. Not going to happen for ABC. Definitely going to happen with Warner Brothers because the crossover episode is coming up really, really soon. I believe it's coming up, I think mid-November is the crossover episode. It's always around episode 8 for the shows. The crossovers always do really good. My guess is that Supergirl, Flash, and Arrow will all hit the 3s. Flash probably will hit the 4s. Supernatural is just, it is what it is. And overall, I really think Once is just going to keep on plateauing where it is. So I'm happy with these numbers. I think TV last week did really, really good. And I'm looking forward to seeing where the numbers will lead to next week, or from this week, and compare them to what we have right now. Now, I have a viewer question, and it is from Andrew Grieve. And he goes, do you think if Once Upon a Time gets canceled on television, it can continue on Netflix and move to Disney's streaming service when that launches? So Disney did launch, or it's attempting to launch, a streaming service. We've talked about this. There's been articles about this. I'll link one in the video description. And I don't think that if Once got canceled after this season, it would instantly hop to Netflix. I would think it would wait until 2020 or 2019, like late 2019, in order to start a possible season 8 on whatever the Disney streaming service is going to be called. Now, the problem with the streaming services is how many are you going to pay for? Because Netflix has so much, you know? And the CW made a deal with Netflix where all their shows will go a week after they're done airing right away. And then there was a ton of Disney properties on Netflix, including the Marvel shows, Once Upon a Time, Grey's Anatomy, Scandal. And now it looks, minus the Marvel shows, everything from Disney is going to be truly pulled off. And would you be willing to pay for a Disney streaming service and then have Netflix to watch everything else? And then remember, the CW is going to have their own streaming service where you can watch the live-action Titans and Young Justice Season 3. So would you pay for both of those streaming services? And if you guys are fans of, say, Game of Thrones, do you pay for HBO? So, like, are you willing to pay for all of these streaming services? I think it's really a crazy idea that there's so many. You would think that the companies would, you know, have a stronger deal with Netflix and just be like, okay, maybe we'll, you know, move the show to Netflix, see how it does after a season. Because a lot of you who watch the show from overseas have asked me, how can I help fix the ratings? And essentially you can't, because it's really dependent on the Nielsen ratings or the boxes and whatnot. And, you know, Once has a much stronger presence in streaming than it does with live viewing. And I had said earlier that Supernatural and Once are kind of similar. And here's why. And this will back into the Netflix question, Andrew, I promise. So Netflix, Supernatural has a large mythology because it's literally pulling from everything. It's pulling from fairy tales, more or less. It's pulling from the supernatural elements. It's pulling from religion. Once Upon a Time pulls from myths, fairy tales, books, and they're even doing version 2 of different fairy tales. So you can essentially go on forever because you can pull from so much source material. So I essentially think that Supernatural and Once are almost synonymous. I really think that the CW, or the ABC, has their Supernatural, because Once could essentially go on forever. But the problem is, do you want to see it go on forever? Because you kind of want your characters to have a happy ending. And you don't want it to keep, you know, revamping it with different versions of your characters, etc. So I would say if Disney decides to cancel Once, maybe leave it as it is. Don't do a season 8, but have the creators of Once Upon a Time start, you know, I would say like an offshoot and do Once Upon a Time Oz, Once Upon a Time Frozen, Once Upon a Time The Little Mermaid, like kind of go into like live action versions of their films, more or less, or live action versions of different fairy tales. But don't just be going like everything's Once Upon a Time where everything is connected and there are like a billion realms and there's the Italian Cinderella realm and there's the Spanish Snow White realm. I just don't think that's smart. Though my guess is because the streaming service is going to, for Disney, is supposedly going to have its own original content, I'm guessing we're going to get stuff like that, whether it's Once or not. In all honesty, I really think that Once should just kind of see where, you know, it goes for season 7 before we even kind of talk about an 8, because maybe the book will close and then it's just going to be rebooted again, because that's my fear with the show, is because it's its mythology is so heavily pulled from well, everything. You can essentially go on forever, but you kind of want your characters to reach an end point, which is why I like season 6 so much, because you felt the book close and you're like, okay, good. I don't like do a reboot with different characters, but let's not say they're all related. Let's just have it by the same creative team, which is what it's going to actually happen with HBO's Game of Thrones, because after season 8 ends in 2019, we're going to get sequels and prequels, which I think would be really cool, or just sequels, or no, it's just prequels. Excuse me. So anyway, Andrew, to answer your question, I think that Netflix. I think that Netflix will not get a season 8. They will definitely get season 7, but I do think that there's definitely going to be some original content for Fairy Tales, etc. Probably the Once team will work on the streaming service, but I don't know if it's going to be Once Upon a Time specifically. So anyway, what did you guys think of the ratings? Are you happy that everything essentially stayed relatively stagnant and went up minus the shows on the CW? What do you think of Andrew's viewer question? And happy Halloween. Thank you so much for watching this video, and we will talk really soon. All right, guys. Bye.